Okay, this video is going to be a review for you for 5.2 where we're verifying trait identities. I have some practice problems that I would like to walk through with you. I have the Pythagorean identities up here that are going to be important for us, the sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And then you can derive these two by first dividing everything by sine squared, so you get the second identity here. Or you can divide everything by cosine squared and get this third identity as well. So I just have those up top in case we need them. I'm just going to walk through a couple problems with you, and then after you watch this video, there's some practice problems posted on Canvas for you to try. And I have in the announcement for today both a worksheet and an answer key for you. And then on Wednesday, I'll go over any questions that you have because your quiz is going to be on Friday. Okay, so for this first problem, we're going to start on the left-hand side and try and make it look like the right. So we're going to see that we have a cosine squared here that we can rewrite using this identity. So cosine squared is really equal to 1 minus sine squared if we move that sine squared over. So now we have everything in terms of sine on the left, which looks good for us because we need an answer in terms of sine on the right. And then the next thing you want to notice is this top piece here has some perfect squares in it. 1's a perfect square and so is sine squared, and we're subtracting those, so that's the difference of squares. So you do have to be able to recognize some of those algebraic things to be doing a nice job with these problems. So this is 1 plus sine x and 1 minus sine x all over 1 minus sine x. And now, because we're multiplying these on the top, we're allowed to cancel this piece with this piece on the bottom. And we are left with just 1 plus sine x on the left, which is exactly where we want it to be to equal what's on the right. And you will be done with that first problem. The next one that's on this sheet is a little more complicated than what I want you to be worried about for the quiz this week, so I'm going to jump down to question 3, which is right here. So for this one, we have two fractions that we're trying to add together, and they have different denominators. So we need a common denominator here, which is going to be 1 minus secant times 1 plus secant. So we're going to take this first fraction and multiply by 1 plus secant over 1 plus secant. And then we're going to take the second fraction and multiply by 1 minus secant over 1 minus secant. So these pieces here are, us trying to make sure we have that common denominator. So then we have secant times 1 plus secant minus secant times 1 minus secant. And then the bottom is all the same denominator, and we recognize that 1 minus secant times 1 plus secant is really 1 minus secant squared. So then I'm actually going to skip this problem here, so I'll shuffle down here. I'm going to distribute now this secant within this set of parentheses and this secant here. So I'm going to have secant plus secant squared, and then this minus sign follows here, minus secant, and then a minus times a minus is a plus. Secant squared. And my denominator stays. And then I see that secant and minus secant can disappear because they're exactly the same. And then I have two of these. And now I want to think about this. 1 minus secant squared. If I pop back up here to where I have those identities written, 1 minus secant squared. So if I move this secant squared over here, and I move tangent over here, this would become 1 minus secant squared on the left and negative tangent on the right. So this 1 minus secant squared becomes negative tangent squared. And then we're almost done. So I'll come up here now. And now I have, I'm going to change these into sine and cosine. So I have 2 over cosine squared. The secant is 1 over cosine, so secant squared is a 1 over cosine squared. And then on the bottom, tangent is sine over cosine, so tangent squared is sine squared over cosine squared. And this minus sign is just coming from here. And now we have, again, this fraction over fraction. So we'll change this fraction bar into multiplication. So 2 over cosine squared times, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal here, cosine squared over sine squared, and I still have that minus sign there. So now my cosine squareds can disappear, but I still have that negative sign, so it's negative 2 over sine squared, which, if you remember, is really negative 2 times 1 over sine squared. And what is this? What is 1 over sine squared? It's really cosecant squared. So you finally have negative 2 cosecant squared. And you finally have the left-hand side looking exactly like the right-hand side. So those are those first two problems for you. Number 5 is identical to the one that we just did, where we're getting like denominators using secant. So I think I'm going to jump down to 6. So I'm going to do, I need a common denominator here, so I'm going to multiply this times 1 plus cosine over 1 plus cosine. So 1 minus cosine over tangent. And here's the other part of my denominator, 1 plus cosine over 1 plus cosine. Then I have sine over 1 plus cosine. And I have to multiply this by tangent over tangent. So those pieces that I have boxed out there are what I'm multiplying by to get my common denominators. So on the top now I have 1 minus cosine, 1 plus cosine. When I multiply those together, I get a difference of squares. So I have 1 minus cosine squared plus sine times tangent. And then that's tangent on the bottom times 1 plus cosine. So now what I can do is recognize that 1 minus cosine squared, because you use the Pythagorean identity, is really sine squared. So now I have sine squared. So I'm replacing just this piece right here with sine squared plus sine. And then I'm going to replace tangent with sine over cosine. And then on the bottom, I'm going to keep that as tangent. 1 plus cosine. So now I need a common denominator up on top. So I'm going to multiply this times cosine over cosine. So I'm going to have sine squared cosine plus sine squared all over cosine all over tangent times 1 plus cosine. And now on the top, you want to recognize that you have a sine squared in common, so you can pull that out. So we have sine squared cosine plus 1, because when I pull it out of here, I'm left with cosine. When I pull it out of here, I'm left with 1. That's still over cosine. And then I have tangent 1 plus cosine on the bottom. And now I have this fraction over fraction, which I'm going to do multiply by the reciprocal first for my solution. Almost there. This is kind of a long one. So I have sine squared I'm going to rewrite this as 1 plus cosine, which is the same thing as this. I just want to rewrite it so you can see something a little more easily. And then cosines on the bottom. This division symbol becomes multiplication, and when I do the reciprocal of this, that ends up on the bottom. So now 1 plus cosine on the top and the bottom is allowed to disappear. And I have sine squared on the top and tangent times cosine on the bottom, which is really sine over cosine times cosine. So my cosines disappear. So I really have sine squared over sine, which is just sine, which is where I was trying to go, to begin with. So get all that in there, make it a little smaller. That was a long one. So I finally have sine down here at the bottom, which is where I was trying to go, equal to sine up here. So 6 was a little tricky. So I just wanted to do those couple of problems for you for today. And I have, as I said, a worksheet and some answers posted for you. So hopefully that will be helpful. And then on Wednesday, we'll do a conference together to see what questions you may have. Okay, thanks guys.